All right. Well, I apologize to anyone who might have actually seen that first live stream. I don't think the sound worked at all, but I hopefully have got it working. It seems like everything's going along. But we'll just take it from the top. I'm probably going to run through it a little bit quicker because I got stuff to do today. And that first half hour kind of sucked up the time that I had set aside for this. But such is life. So let me, there we go. Uh, let me show you around really quick. I changed the room that we're in so that I'm hopefully getting a better connection. I moved some plants around so you can see some nicer stuff in the background. Unfortunately, the connection was just really bad in the fish room, so I just couldn't continue it there. Anyway, we are going to start from the top. I'm going to really quickly run through everything that I talked about in the last video, apparently that no one could hear, so hopefully everything works better this time. All right, so here's my crudely drawn aquarium. And I think to start talking about aquarium maintenance, we have to talk about the nitrogen cycle. So we'll touch on that really quickly. The nitrogen cycle, basically fish make waste, and that becomes ammonia or ammonium, depending on your pH. But for most people, it's ammonia. So this is NH4. If I like to memorize these, it just makes my life easier, but I also do it for a job. But the symbol for ammonium, NH4. Anyway, that bacteria starts to show up in the tank. That bacteria eats the ammonia. It can convert it using whatever complex processes that we don't need to talk about today to create nitrite. Eventually, bacteria that can eat nitrite will show up in the tank, and they will turn it into nitrate. From there, there is nothing that really eats nitrate, with the caveat being if you have a very deep sand bed, anaerobic bacteria will, but that's a more complex idea that I would say don't start out if you're a beginner. And so from here, to get rid of the ammonia, you have two options. One, water change, which is what a lot of us do, or two, these guys. I use both methods, water change and fertilizer, but plants help a lot. Plants will take out that nitrate out of the water. Truth be told, they like ammonia more than they like nitrate for photosynthesis, but we'll talk about that later. That's a different live stream for a different day. Anyway, so basically we're going to talk about mostly water changes with some other stuff that I have drawn in here. So I got to get used to this ring light. I didn't want it to be too dark, but hopefully you can see that okay. Not much to see. I'm not an artist. Okay. Anyway, so we'll take it from the top. I'll just kind of grab some things that I'd set down around me. I believe last time I started with these guys. So these are potato chip clips, but I use them like clamps. Obviously, if you have a bigger tank or larger hosing, actual clamps from Home Depot or Lowe's is very helpful. It also allows you to do solo water changes. I can do water changes by myself, basically, because I can clamp onto my bucket or whatever I'm using to fill my tank, clamp a hose on that side, clamp the other side of the hose in the tank, and once I start the suction, it's going from there, and I'm kind of hands-free. So that's very helpful. These guys, I think, was that like Dollar General or something, or you can upgrade and get the real things. Those will hold really powerful flows if you're using a power head, which we'll talk about in a second. Next is going to be, how do you remove algae? This is algae. It comes in lots of different kinds, and sometimes it's on plants, but in this case, we're going to talk about like on glass. Basically, you're going to take, I use a sponge. I'm the kind of guy who likes to get his hands in his tank when he's working on it. So sponges are my go-to. Also, a magic eraser sponge works wonders. They are amazing, and they will get almost any algae off of any glass. I say that with confidence. So anyway, we'll take the sponge, comes through, you know, it'll start, you can slowly rub off, especially when it's like brown algae. We'll talk about the algae later on a different video, but this sponge will do the brown algae. So say you have some green spot algae or some harder algae, this is where a razor blade can come in handy. Take the little razor blade and scrape it across the edge right there. You can see them coming off. So that is very handy to get some of the more stubborn algae off, is a razor blade. You don't need the little handle doodad I have here. It's just more comfortable and easier to show you all. Stands out a bit more. Now, with that said, if you have an acrylic tank, do not use a razor blade. Go get yourself an acrylic razor blade, or do some other method. If you have questions about that, you can leave a comment down below. Because I work with acrylic tanks a lot, I can tell you several methods of how to get rid of algae off of them without scratching your tank. Because this guy, if you try and use it on an acrylic tank, you're going to have a lot of scratches and you're going to be very mad at me, and I don't want that. So don't do this. If anything, just go hard with a sponge, or again, magic eraser, great for an acrylic tank. Okay, so that covers mostly how I would go through cleaning my glass. Next, we can go through, kind of lost track of what order I was giving things. Oh, we'll talk about this real quick. This is like a pole sponge. This gets into some harder crevices and stuff, also for cleaning glass. Still very useful. And if you want to kind of be hands-free on the tank, this helps. I don't think, oh, I do. Okay. Magnet. So there's all different kinds. This one, if you magnet it to either side of the glass, you can wipe it around. My suggestion is get a microfiber cloth or a paper towel for the outside. That way, no matter what tank you have, you won't scratch it, and it'll help get any water driplets and anything off. It'll make a nice clean finish. Other side, if you have like very fine filter floss, it's very soft. Poly filter will also work. I think you can buy that at Walmart for like a big bag, is like $6. But poly filter works great on the inside. That will help pull that out, all that algae off the glass. It'll also help a lot in acrylic tanks so that you don't scratch your glass. Very important. For acrylic tank people, if you don't know this, I would recommend looking towards a glass tank because they're a lot more tough, and they don't take scratches that easy. But make sure that if you have sand particles in one of these, you're not moving your glass on your glass, or else you are going to scratch it. So sand, grains, rocks, pebbles in between these things on an acrylic tank will scratch it. Need some coffee. Oh, need some water. Goodness, throat's dry. Sorry, this is my second time running through this spiel. So I've been talking for almost 40 minutes straight. Okay, we're moving on. Anyway, we'll talk about this guy. Dead fish in the corner. Unfortunately, fish die. It's very sad, but it happens to all of us. It happened to me just the other day. I pulled my pre-filter sponge, which we'll talk about in a second, out of my tank to clean it, and one of my pygmy cories got sucked in the inflow, and I had to fish it out. Very unfortunate. Hate to see him go, but unfortunately, crazy things like that do happen. So what do we do to get them out? That's where these guys come and play. Obviously, nets are going to be your best friend there. I have a variety of them. These are probably only half maybe of what I have, but very small net. I like to use this guy a lot. Gets in tight places. It's also great for shrimp, and can get some of the smaller fish too. But this one's helpful for nimble, agile movement, things like that. Moving on, we'll talk about this guy. This is bulky one. This is like if you don't really care how your tank looks in the end, or you don't really have any hardscape, this is great for catching lots of fish or big fish, which is very handy. So this is pretty useful when I'm collecting my guppies up for sale or to bring them in for the winter. That I can catch up like 30, 40 at a time, plop them in wherever they're going. Anyway, next one is this. This is another net. Ooh, I think I have to sneeze. Move it. And yeah, I sneeze a lot. Continuing on, this mesh net is a little bit finer. So this works really well for catching fry. If you're breeding, this can help catch really small things. This works really well for shrimp. If you're a shrimp keeper or a shrimp enthusiast, most, if not all shrimp can't get out of this thing. So that works out really well for you if you need to move them around. This also works really well for cleaning up any stuff floating at the surface. If you have floating leaves or plants or anything like that at the surface, you can go ahead and net all of that up. With this guy, since nothing can really get through this mesh, but it is a bit of a pain to clean because it's just so fine, but you know, it's a give and take. It also depends how clean you want your tank to be. Sometimes a few floating leaves isn't the end of the world, if you ask me. Okay, next is going to be these tweezers. We will talk more about these in plant maintenance, but these are great for replanting any plants that floated up, or if you cut any plant stems and you want to plant them back in, these are great. You can dig them right back into the soil without agitating a lot, because using these fat things can sometimes get in the way and cause other plants to float up. So these are more for precision. If you're an aquascaper, I'm sure you know about these, or if you don't, these are definitely helpful. They also can be used for other things, like when my pygmy Cory got stuck in my hang-on back, I had to use these to grab him and pull him out. So these are very good to get in tight places as well. Moving on. For Fluval, this is Clearex. I have yet to try it. It came with my Fluval Flex, but it's basically Windex for an aquarium, because Windex has ammonia in it, and if you spray ammonia on a tank and some of it gets in the water, it could kill your fish, it could kill a lot of things. It just could create a disaster in your tank. So that's why they gave me this, I guess. I haven't tried it. I will try it out sometime, but I usually just use like a microfiber cloth anyway, but that is an option. So there you go, Fluval. We'll see how it goes, and I'll let you all know sometime in the future whenever I try it out. Okay, moving on. Airline tubing. So one, air is important for all fish, so having lots of airflow and airline tubing can be very helpful to have on hand. Two, it is great for doing for aquascaping and water changes and things like that, where you can suck up poop and things in very tight spots without taking out a lot of water or disturbing a lot if you have to be very gentle in locations. Also, it is good for drip loops. This is a drip loop. Basically, you tie a knot into an airline tubing and you hang it from the tank that you are going to be putting the fish in. And then you are going to hang this end over the fish bin that you are acclimating, if that makes sense. So I have a tank. So say, even though there's a dead fish in here, I am going to acclimate some fish, let's say this container, and you're going to acclimate those guys to put into here. So basically, I'm going to run a drip line, and then here, the squiggly knot part is going to be my knot that I tied, and I'm going to put it in there. If that makes sense, hopefully you can see that it's going this direction. And it is going to basically be exactly like it says. It is going to be a drip. You want a slow drip for most fish. Now, When it comes to how long, that depends on how hardy the fish is and how far off your parameters are from where you got them. We'll talk more in depth on this another day. But basically what that means is if you feel like these fish are very sensitive, you can generally find that info online for any fish. Then you may want this drip to take 30, 45 minutes. It'll allow the temperature, pH, nitrate, all of that good stuff to slowly acclimate over time for the fish to become more comfortable to your water instead of the water they came in. So for me, that's especially important because I have very hard water, and a lot of the fish I get come from very soft water, especially if I'm shipping them from basically any other part of the country. So that's important for me. So most fish, I would say 45 minutes max is good for the sensitive fish. I would do 15 to 30 for the more hardy fish like guppies and danios. And then if it is shrimp, they're very sensitive to water changes. So I actually do like an hour and a half, sometimes up to 3 hours for a drip loop on shrimp. It can be very slow, but it is very important to them that they slowly become accustomed to your water so they don't get shocked and they don't just die. That can happen very often in the early stages of adding shrimp to a new tank. You may get some die off and they'll come back. We'll talk shrimp another day because I love shrimp, so I can go on and on about them, but I don't have the time today. So drip loop, you can tighten it, loosen it to adjust it, but you want it to be above the water so it's just literally is dripping in. So it will slowly add the new water in. Also, it will create surface agitation, which will allow oxygen to get into the tank so you don't have to worry about oxygenating those fish while they're getting accustomed to it. You can if you are worried about it, but I haven't had an issue with fish gasping at the surface unless I got like 30 guppies in a little container. But most people don't have that. So, moving on. Aqua Clear 110 foam. I like it so much. I have 2. I don't even know what the fun is. There, 2. I use it for all kinds of stuff. Replacement sponge for basically any hang-on back, any canister filter. They're huge. They're cheap. If you can buy them at your local fish store, they're usually like $6 or $7. I always recommend supporting your local fish store. If you can't, you can buy them on Amazon for even cheaper, and they show up in like 2 days if you have Prime, and they're very helpful for replacing old bad sponge, for easy replacement in like a canister filter because some of them are pretty complex, and this helps. Also, most importantly, in this diagram, this object right here, that is a pre-filter sponge. Pre-filter sponges are extremely helpful to catching all this detritus and stuff, like dead leaves or even dead fish, things like that, or just like gunk in the tank. It helps catch it so it doesn't get sucked up into your filter and clog or damage the engine or the motor in there. So those are very helpful. I cut all of mine using this guy. These basically can cut to do any foam thing you need, even if you need to replace an old sponge filter. You can probably manicure one of these into whatever you need. So, but again, real quick on pre-filter sponges, because I'm a big advocate for them. I use them on all of my hang-on backs. Why? Because they will protect you from having a lot of heartache. What I mean by that is sometimes plants can get knocked up and sucked in there, and if you don't have a pre-filter sponge, you are going to end up sometimes losing plants because the motor will just destroy them, or it could destroy the motor and you have to buy a new hang-on back. 2, this fish could get sucked over there, end up in there. That would be bad. 3, there is a fish that's alive, one of these guys, let's say, and it gets sucked up in there. That suction is going to kill it. That's exactly what happened to my pygmy cory the other day. I moved my pre-filter sponge to clean it. It got sucked up in there. It died. Unfortunately, kind of my fault, but I was trying to just clean this guy because it was all clogged up. Unfortunately, freak accidents like that happen, but the pre-filter sponge would have prevented him from dying. So I'm a big advocate of them. I strongly recommend. It creates more surface area for bacteria. I could go on and on. If you have a, if you have a canister filter, you can still do this. Just make sure you clean it regularly. But I still strongly recommend them. They do make pre-made ones. If you are lazy or just don't want to do like all the maintenance with an X-Acto knife on this guy, I can understand that. Sometimes you cut your fingers, it happens. But I would definitely recommend getting some of this for pre-filter sponges, or just pre-filter sponges in general. All right, enough about pre-filter sponges because I've said it like 60 times in the past minute. Anyway, this is a siphon. Any siphon type will work. I sometimes will use little airline tubing. This guy, bigger stuff. We'll talk about that in a second. Basically, anything that can create a siphon to siphon up your tank. Now, this guy's nice. I actually got this from buying something else, and they just gave it to me. They didn't want it anymore, so this was actually free. I've never tried it, but it looks good. Looks decent. But basically, this ball creates a vacuum, and you can start your water that way. This screen over here will protect any of your rocks and stuff from getting sucked up, but it'll help still get past the dirt through. You can get longer hoses for these too, like this guy. So anyway, this pretty useful. This is a nice siphon starter. You can also just suck on the end of the hosing. I'm not going to do that because I don't know where this has been and I haven't cleaned it yet, but you could do that. That's my usual go-to method. It works well. If you're in a river or a lake or anything, it's happened already, so not a big deal if you ask me. But a note on siphoning themselves. I do not siphon my gravel. I don't do it on any of my tanks. Some people say you have to. Some people say you don't have to. I think it's whatever your preference is. If you like doing it and you find it's nice and clean and it's aesthetically pleasing, then go ahead and do it. But if you start doing it, continue doing it. Don't stop. But make sure, you don't have to do it every single time, maybe every other time, or if you're doing a weekly water change, maybe the fourth time. But I don't do it because I have lots of plants and I don't want to knock them up. So I never do a water change or never vacuum my gravel. If you are going to vacuum gravel, continue doing it. If you're not, don't start. That's the easiest thing I can say to that. And you can vacuum gravel if you have plants you just don't want to jab in there. You want to just kind of hover over and pick up the stuff. Excuse me. Oh, an hour of talking. Goodness gracious. I can never be a teacher. Anyway. Now, one thing to do to make water changes faster, which is a little more complex, and you by no means have to do it, but it makes my life easier because I'm doing water changes every week a lot. This end you could connect to a power head, and then you put the power head in the water. I have an older video on it that you can look back on my YouTube channel and see how I do this. But I will also try and show you my updated water change system because now it's even more complex. But it is faster. I can almost do all of my tanks in about 30 to 45 minutes. So that's pretty quick, considering it's like 100 gallons and like 10 different tanks. But anyway, power head to this, you put that in the tank. Then you can pump this out wherever you want. It'll pull the water from the tank, push it through the hose wherever you want it to go. You can also do that in the reverse, put it in a fresh bucket of water or some container of water, and then put that other end of the hose into the tank, and that'll pump it into the tank so that you're not lifting buckets and dumping in. So with that said, if you are lifting buckets and dumping in, this, even though I still use a power head with a hose, because I don't want my plants flying everywhere and sand and all of that mess all over the place. I like to keep my tank clean. The colander is huge. This is an extendable colander. I got it on Amazon. And yes, this is a free plug because I think this thing is so amazing and so helpful. It was like 15 bucks. And it reaches up to like 36 inches. So I can stretch it across any one of my tanks since they're 40 gallons. But anyone should be able to use that for pretty much any size tank, unless you have a really weird dimension. But I think it reaches to like 36 inches or something. I don't remember. But super helpful. It's rubber, so it's not going to rust and possibly harm your plants and your fish. And it creates a rain-like effect, which the fish seem to enjoy. But on top of that, it creates very little disturbance in the water so that it's not knocking plants up. It's not knocking, or it's not kicking sand or knocking any of your hardscape over. So this creates a very gentle movement. You can also use just a plastic bag, like a grocery bag. I know a lot of people use that, and you put the hose on the end of it, and then it'll slowly float up. But sometimes I have complications with that. I never have a complication with this. Also, if you're just dumping a bucket of water, you can just dump a whole bucket of water on this thing. It'll slowly move it out down through the holes, and you can do a really rapid water change. That's what I usually do for like my 10 gallons. I'll just dump the bucket of water on top of the colander, quick water change. It makes it like 5 minutes. All right, so we're getting pretty close to the end here. This is a toothbrush that my girlfriend made that is for getting into tight spaces. So sometimes as aquarists, we don't have the tools we need, so we have to get clever. This is one of those times. We just kind of melted down the toothbrush, bent it in half so that you can get into some more tighter places. And it is very helpful in getting that algae off. So main point of this is just, as aquarists, sometimes we have to think out of the box, get a little creative, and just try and consider the world as your oyster when it comes to creating tools and things that you need to make your life easier. Anyway, let's see what we have here. Those are more razors. I have a couple of these. I wouldn't consider this water maintenance because you don't really need them. But these are, when I usually first start out a tank, these are biomagnet clarifiers. They basically are a clumping agent that helps create larger clumps for your tank to be able to take out of the water through a hang-on back or whatever filtration you're using. So that'll help clear your tank up faster. It's by no means necessary. Let's see. These are Gerber tools. Multi-tools have a lot of different purposes, uses. They are very nice for seemingly endless possibilities. So I keep one of these handy all the time. You never know if you need to cut airline tubing or grab something really hard with these pliers, something like that. Okay. Perfect. So here's a good example. This is a pre-filter sponge. You can see opening that I have cut with an X-Acto knife that you can then place onto the sponge or onto the hang-on back or whatever it is. This will protect you from losing your fish and losing all kinds of stuff, plants, but it will save you heartache. It'll do a lot of things. Fishing line. Fishing line is great for tying mosses down or any epiphyte plant, your Anubias, your Java ferns, all of those things. Great for tying it down and making sure that it doesn't go anywhere. I'm not very good at using this, so I like super glue, but some people can tie fishing line very well. So that's very helpful. You can get really creative with all kinds of ideas for these, creating like a webbing on a hardscape to create like a tree-like effect, or all kinds of other stuff, tying onto rocks, etc., etc. So, but the point is that fishing line does not, it will not hurt your fish. It does not break down over time or for a very long time. So it is aquarium safe. All righty. And then I think, oh, one more. This, very similar to, where did it go? Where did it go? This, which I have not actually talked about. These two are kind of for moving substrate or sand around. They are great, especially this guy, for when you are first starting out a tank and it's still dry. Moving your stuff around, it's especially important in aquascaping, so a video I'll talk about later. So, but for the most part, when it comes to tank maintenance, these are good for moving your substrate around if you knocked anything around. It also will help smooth your sand out, and or turn your sand over if you have a saltwater tank, or if you have a sand like aquarium, something algae on top of the sand. You can use this to kind of turn the sand, and that way you will be able to get cleaner, nicer looking sand. Again, it's an aesthetics thing. You don't have to. These are just ideas. But I use this all the time to help push some of my substrate. Sometimes this is my little sand pile down here. That sand pile, oh, geez, this glares. I'm trying to get a good angle. Okay, that sand pile will get covered in like rocks and stuff. So we can use one of these brushes to help clear that up, and then just wipe that away. And then you can see the sand again. Or if there is like rocks mixed in, that can help stir it up so that the rocks go to the bottom and the sand's still sitting on top. All right. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is how to get rid of any dead or ugly looking plants. So the first one obviously are these guys. You can just pull the plant out if the whole thing's dead, or if it's just like a floating leaf, you can use a net. But if you have a pair of scissors, any type of scissors will work, but they do have special aquascaping scissors that are angled, which help get into places a little bit easier without making a mess of your tank. Another video for another day, but that will help get rid of this guy, so that your tank, now that you've done your water change and everything, is nice and clean. All right, so I think that about covers all the stuff that I have. Yeah, that pretty much covers everything I've got on water maintenance or aquarium maintenance. So that's all I've got for today. Again, I'm glad I actually convinced myself, or got everything ready to do this. It worked out well. I'm going to keep moving through these bins that I have. Each week we'll probably be talking about a different one. I'm not sure what next week's will be, but I'm going to keep trying to do this every weekend. It may be on Saturday normally, but unfortunately my power or my internet was gone all day yesterday, so it didn't get a chance to do that. But anyway, that's all I got. So if you guys have any questions about aquarium maintenance, or especially if you have an acrylic tank and have questions about that, feel free to leave a comment down below. I do not have them personally, but I work with them all the time for my job, so I know how to take care of them pretty well. So if you guys have questions, I can answer and direct you to some other items that I don't have here, but that I do use for my profession, that come in very handy. But if you have any other questions, comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like is always appreciated. If you have not already subscribed and you want to learn some stuff about aquariums, or you find this entertaining in some way or helpful, then feel free to subscribe. I will be trying to do some more videos like this every week, and then I'm hoping to try and start doing some monthly videos again. We'll see how that goes. But until next time, you all take care and stay awesome.